What are the raw materials required for photosynthesis? The raw materials are carbon dioxide, water, sunlight, and chlorophyll. Let's talk about chlorophyll. In plant cells, chlorophyll is found in cell organelles called chloroplasts, which are primarily found in the mesophyll cells of leaves. This pigment helps in absorbing sunlight during photosynthesis, which brings about the splitting of water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen. The solar energy absorbed by chlorophyll gets converted into chemical energy of food during the process of photosynthesis. Now the question is, how do plants obtain carbon dioxide and water? Plants obtain water through their roots, which is then transported to all plant parts through the help of a tissue called xylem. Now what about carbon dioxide? The exchange of gases, that is the entry of carbon dioxide and the release of oxygen, occurs through small pores called stomata. Do you recognize this figure? Well, it represents stomata, which are tiny pores present mainly on the surface of leaves. As you can see on the screen, the opening of stomata is surrounded by two distinct epidermal cells known as guard cells. The opposing inner walls of the guard cells are thick and inelastic, while the remaining walls are thin and elastic. Now the next question is, how do plants control the opening and closing of stomata? This function is carried out by the creation of an osmotic pressure difference. Now what is that? Let me explain. When water enters the guard cells, the outer walls of the cells expand outward because they are thin and elastic. Now because of this, a pore is created between them, and this leads to the opening of the stomata. On the other hand, when the guard cells lose water, they shrink, thereby closing the stomatal pore.
Functions of chloroplasts. Chloroplasts play an important role in the process of photosynthesis. It is a process by which plants produce their own food. Chloroplasts help in this process by three ways. That is, by trapping the sunlight, by synthesis of ATP and NADPH, and by incorporating CO2 into starch. Now all this occurs with the help of two types of reactions, namely the light reaction and the dark reaction. Light reactions are dependent on light, and during this phase, synthesis of ATP and NADPH occurs. On the other hand, dark reactions are not directly dependent on light, and during this phase, incorporation of CO2 into starch occurs.
That basically a chlorophyll pigment is required for photosynthesis. On chromatographic separation of leaf pigments, 4 pigments were obtained. One is named chlorophyll A, which is bright blue-green in color. Second pigment, chlorophyll B, which is yellow-green in color. Xanthophyll pigments, which is yellow in color, and carotenoids, which is yellowish orange in color. So when the chromatographic separation is done on a paper, you obtain 4 pigments. The lowermost is the chlorophyll A. Next to it is chlorophyll B. Next to it is xanthophyll. And the topmost is carotenoids. Let's study the role of chlorophyll pigment today. The chlorophyll pigment absorbs light at specific wavelengths. For example, chlorophyll A absorbs light at 680 nm, that is the red wavelength, and at 420 nm, that is the blue wavelength. And most photosynthesis takes place in the blue and red wavelength. There are some more chlorophyll pigments which are called the accessory pigments. They are called accessory pigments as they are not involved in photosynthesis directly, such as chlorophyll B, xanthophyll, and carotenoids. These are the accessory pigments, and they absorb wide range of wavelengths of the visible spectrum. The function of accessory pigments is to absorb light and transfer energy to chlorophyll A. And it also has another function, that is, it protects chlorophyll A from photooxidation. Hence, chlorophyll A is the chief pigment associated with photosynthesis. Carbon dioxide concentration is the major limiting factor for photosynthesis. Increase in concentration up to 0.05% causes increase in carbon dioxide fixation, while beyond 0.05%, the carbon dioxide causes damage to the chlorophyll. Let's see how does C3 and C4 plants respond to carbon dioxide concentration. At low carbon dioxide concentration, there is no response in both the plants. At high carbon dioxide concentration, there is increase in photosynthesis in C3 plants as well as in C4 plants. And the saturation point for both the plants are 450 ml per liter in C3 plants and 360 ml per liter in C4 plants. As you know that the current carbon dioxide level is slightly above than 0.04%, which is acting as a limiting factor for C3 plants. High carbon dioxide concentration is used in greenhouse crops to increase their productivity, such as tomatoes, bell pepper, etc. Carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. We are going to discuss one of the experiment which has the following steps. The first step is that part of the leaf is enclosed in a test tube containing some KOH soaked cotton. KOH helps in absorbing the carbon dioxide present in the test tube, while the other part of the leaf is exposed to air. That means one part is inside the test tube, other is exposed to air. This setup is then kept in sunlight for some time, say around an hour. Then both the parts were tested for the presence of starch. Observation was blue-green color in the exposed part of leaf. Hence, we can conclude that starch is present in the exposed part. And the inference that you draw from this experiment is that carbon dioxide is required for photosynthesis. As you can see in this experiment, that the leaf which was kept inside that affect photosynthesis are: first is the availability of light, without which photosynthesis cannot take place. Then temperature. Plants cannot photosynthesize at extremes of the temperature. Then the carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere and water availability. So as you can see that one factor is the major cause and limits the rate of photosynthesis. It is called a limiting factor. As Blackman has given a law of limiting factor, the law states that if a chemical process is affected by more than one factor, then its rate will be determined by the factor which is nearest to its minimal value. It is the factor which directly affects the process of photosynthesis if its quantity is changed. Factors affecting photosynthesis. One is the internal and the other is external. Let us first talk about the internal factors. Internal factors involve number, size, age, and orientation of leaves. That is, whether they are facing the sunlight directly or not. Then it depends upon the mesophyll cells, chloroplasts, internal carbon dioxide concentration, amount of chlorophyll, and is also dependent upon genetic constitution and growth of plants. Linear relationship between incident light and carbon dioxide fixation at lower light intensities. But as the incident light increases, it doesn't show further increase in photosynthesis as depicted in this graph. As you can see in this graph, as the light intensity is increasing, rate of photosynthesis is increasing, but after a certain point, that is B, the light intensity does not influence photosynthesis and the rate of photosynthesis remains constant. So this point is going to be the point over here, which is coming from D and E, is the optimum point where the maximum photosynthesis would take place. Light saturation occurs at 10% of full sunlight. Increase in incident light beyond a point causes breakdown of chlorophyll and decreases photosynthesis rate. Temperature is also one of an important factor which regulates the rate of photosynthesis, like dark reactions are temperature controlled through enzymes, while the light reactions are temperature sensitive and are less affected through temperature. C4 plants respond to high temperature and hence can tolerate high temperature, while C3 plants respond to little lesser temperature than C4 plants. Temperature optimum of plants depends upon their habitat. Like tropical plants would have an optimum of higher temperature, while the temperate plants would have a lower temperature as optimum. Whenever there is water stress, it could be increase in water or decrease in it, which causes a water stress. This water stress causes stomata closure which indicates that less availability of carbon dioxide and hence less photosynthesis. On water stress, plants' leaves wilt and fall off, because of which there is reduced surface area of leaves and hence less metabolic activity, as all the metabolic activities require water. So with more water or less water, the metabolic activity is definitely affected.